On July 1, 2026, several spans of a key bridge between Donetsk and Mariupol collapsed into the Mali-Kalchik River. For Russia, this was not only a damaged crossing. It was another warning that the roads feeding its southern forces were becoming harder to use, harder to repair, and far more dangerous to protect. In recent weeks, Ukrainian strikes have moved beyond trucks and fuel tankers. Bridges, bypass routes, temporary crossings, and repair equipment have all come under pressure, while reconnaissance drones have watched the roads that Russian convoys still depend on. That raises a serious question. What happens to an army when its vehicles are forced onto longer routes, its engineers cannot work safely, and its soldiers begin paying the price before they even reach the front? This campaign may not change the map in one night, but it could weaken the system behind every Russian attack in the south. Stay with Military Force as we examine how Ukraine is trying to turn Russia's supply network into its next battlefield. Ukraine is widening its campaign against Russian logistics in the south by striking the bridges that connect Donetsk, Mariupol, the Sea of Azov coast, and the roads leading toward Crimea. The Donetsk to Mariupol corridor carries much more than civilian traffic. According to Ukrainian reporting, it is used to move troops, ammunition, fuel, weapons, engineering equipment, and replacement vehicles toward Russian positions across the southern front. From Mariupol, the wider road network continues west through Berdyansk and Melitopol before reaching Crimea. That makes each major crossing part of a much larger military system. A late fuel delivery can hold back armored units, while delayed ammunition can reduce the fire available to infantry and artillery. When one bridge is lost, the damage is measured not only in broken concrete, but also in delayed convoys and missed delivery schedules. That wider pressure became clear near Kremenivka. On July 1st, several spans of the bridge over the Mali-Kalchik River collapsed across both directions of traffic. Published images also appeared to show damage to the supporting structures, leaving the crossing unsuitable for normal military movement. Ukraine said the bridge was one of 3 logistics crossings attacked during a coordinated operation in Donetsk and Luhansk. Local authorities installed by Russia also acknowledged the collapse and directed vehicles toward other roads. That admission mattered because it confirmed that the disruption was real, even if the full repair time remained unknown. Heavy trucks cannot simply cross damaged spans in the same way as cars, because their weight places far greater stress on weakened supports. The strike also came after another important crossing had already been damaged farther south. Near Novoazovsk, Ukrainian drones struck the bridge over the Hruski Yalanchik River in late June. The crossing sat on another section of the land corridor running toward Crimea, and it had reportedly been targeted before. The latest attack caused part of the deck to collapse and limited the movement of heavy vehicles. Taken together, the two strikes suggest that Ukraine was trying to reduce the carrying capacity of the whole route, rather than create one dramatic explosion. This matters because a supply line can fail even when some traffic still passes through it. The effect became more serious when Russian traffic was pushed onto smaller roads. Convoys forced away from the main highway must use village streets, secondary routes, or crossings with lower capacity. Those choices increase fuel use and reduce the number of trips a truck can complete each day. They also create new points of congestion, where many vehicles must slow down, wait, or pass through the same narrow area. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones can watch those locations, follow the movement, and send coordinates to strike teams. The danger is therefore measured in exposure as much as distance. A convoy that spends another hour inside a watched corridor gives Ukraine more time to identify its cargo and prepare an attack. Drivers may also be forced to travel at night, spread out, or pause under cover, which can reduce the volume moved during each cycle. This is where the reported decline on the R-280 becomes important. Robert Brovdy, commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, said military cargo traffic on the R-280 fell by about 71% over 2 weeks. According to his figures, daily movement dropped from roughly 3,800 vehicles to nearly 1,100. The claim has not been independently confirmed, so it should be treated with caution. Still, It reflects the wider purpose of the campaign. Ukraine does not need to destroy every truck to weaken the route. It only needs to make movement slower, less reliable, and more dangerous than Russian planners can accept. Yet a destroyed bridge creates lasting pressure only when replacement crossings, repair teams, and bypass routes can also be denied at the same time. The more dangerous phase of Ukraine's bridge campaign begins after the first explosion because the real target is no longer only the crossing. It is the repair system that comes after it. In earlier wars, destroying a bridge often bought a few days while engineers cleared debris and built a temporary route. Medium-range drones have changed that pattern. They can stay near the area, watch roads leading to the site, and identify cranes, rail machines, fuel trucks, and engineering teams as soon as they arrive. This turns reconstruction into a visible military operation rather than a protected rear area task. Once that happens, every repair decision becomes part of the battle. The cycle is simple, but its pressure is constant. Ukraine strikes a bridge and waits. Russia sends engineers, heavy equipment, and security units to restore movement. Reconnaissance drones then locate the new activity and pass coordinates to strike crews. Attack drones return against vehicles, machinery, or the damaged structure itself. Russian commanders must then choose between keeping engineers inside a known target zone or sending traffic onto a longer and less efficient route. Neither choice is safe, and both consume time, fuel, and manpower. That repeated contest became especially clear near Rozdolny. On the night of June 22nd, Ukraine's Special Operations Forces said they struck a railway bridge over the North Crimean Canal near Rozdolny. The attack damaged the tracks and brought down one span, interrupting rail movement through the area. Members of a Ukrainian resistance network later reported that Russian repair equipment had arrived at the site. The following night, drones returned and struck the machinery along with the remaining structure. Ukraine then said the crossing could no longer function. The event shows why a second strike can matter more than the first. The opening attack creates the break, but another attack prevents quick recovery and increases the cost of every attempt to restore the line. This pattern also forces Russia to reveal priorities. The equipment sent first shows which route matters most, while the defenses moved nearby expose what commanders fear losing. Ukraine can then study the response, identify weak coverage, and decide whether to strike again, attack the detour, or wait until more valuable machinery gathers at the site for repairs. That same logic also applies to temporary crossings. Pontoon bridges can be placed quickly, but speed is their main advantage and also their weakness. They usually carry less weight, allow slower traffic, and require vehicles to cross in small groups. This creates a narrow point where trucks, armored vehicles, and engineering crews may gather before moving forward. From the air, that pattern is easier to see than traffic on a normal highway. Once the location is known, a pontoon crossing is difficult to hide or move before another attack arrives. Reports have described Russian forces using temporary crossings after strikes around Chonhar, Henichesk, and the northern approaches to Crimea. These solutions can reopen movement, but they also create fresh targets that demand constant protection. The pressure on Russian engineers may be one of the most important results of this campaign. Cranes, rail laying machines, transporters, bridge sections, and trained technical crews are harder to replace than ordinary cargo trucks. If even one key machine is destroyed, a repair that might take days can take much longer. Russia must also move air defense, electronic warfare systems, and security troops toward work sites that were once considered safe. Those resources cannot protect every depot, road, and command post at the same time. The result is a wider strain across the rear area, because fixing one route may weaken another. When main bridges, temporary crossings, and repair teams all remain under observation, the damage begins to directly shape how soldiers move before they ever reach the front. The breakdown of road and bridge access is now changing how some Russian troops reach the front, because vehicles cannot always move as close to combat positions as before. On July 1st, Mikhailo Fedorov said Russian infantry in several southern sectors had been forced to walk as far as 30 kilometers. That claim came from a Ukrainian official and has not been independently confirmed across the entire front. Still, it matches a clear military problem. When trucks cannot enter areas watched by drones, soldiers must leave the vehicles earlier and continue on foot. That turns the final part of a supply route into a long and exposed march. The loss of vehicle access removes a measure of protection, because troops can no longer rely on transport during the approach. The physical burden of that movement is serious. A soldier may carry body armor, a rifle, ammunition, water, food, a radio, batteries, medical gear, and personal equipment. Even without combat, walking 30 kilometers under that load can take most of a day. Heat, mud, darkness, and damaged roads make the journey harder, while constant fear of detection adds mental pressure. Troops who arrive tired have less time to rest, study the ground, dig shelters, or prepare for an attack. The problem is not only the distance itself, because exhaustion begins affecting what the unit can do once it reaches the line. Longer movement also slows the rhythm of replacement and resupply. Frontline soldiers may have to wait longer before another group arrives to take their place. Wounded men become harder to evacuate, especially when ambulances cannot approach safely. Ammunition, drinking water, food, drone batteries, and medical supplies may need to be divided into smaller loads that can be carried by people or light vehicles. A unit can continue fighting under these conditions, but it cannot maintain the same pressure for many days without rest and steady support. As each delivery becomes smaller and slower, commanders must decide which position receives help first. Smaller groups may reduce congestion, but they remain outside cover for longer periods, and that brings another danger from the drones watching closely above them. Walking may reduce the size of the target, but it does not remove the threat from the air. A scattered infantry group is harder to see than a convoy, yet it remains exposed for much longer. Soldiers crossing tree lines, open fields, dirt roads, or damaged villages can still be detected by reconnaissance drones. Thermal cameras are especially dangerous at night, because body heat can stand out against cold ground. Once a group is found, Ukrainian operators can follow its route and pass coordinates to FPV teams, artillery crews, or bomber drones. Leaving the trucks behind changes the form of danger, but it does not create a safe path. The effect becomes more serious when several delays happen at the same time. One resupply run may arrive hours late. One replacement group may need extra manpower to carry its equipment. One wounded soldier may face a much longer evacuation. None of these problems alone will collapse a formation, but together they reduce speed, endurance, and confidence. A battalion can still report the same number of soldiers on paper while having fewer rested men available for actual combat. It may also become harder to launch assaults, hold newly captured ground, or respond quickly when Ukraine attacks another sector. This is how pressure behind the front can slowly weaken performance at the front. The same transport system also supports far more than infantry movement. Russian drone teams, communications posts, electronic warfare units, and defensive systems across Crimea depend on fuel deliveries and reliable power. When those supplies begin to fail, the next weakness appears in the machines that help Russian forces watch and control the battlefield. The pressure on Russian logistics is spreading beyond roads and bridges, because Crimea depends on a flow of fuel. Strikes on highways, storage sites, and maritime routes have reduced the ways to move supplies into the peninsula. Ukraine's navy has said Russia was forced to rely more on sea transport as land routes became less secure. Al Jazeera reported that fuel sales stopped in Sevastopol and that parts of Crimea faced power cuts, though conditions differed by location. Fuel is not only needed for vehicles, and the next weakness appears inside the systems that control the air war. Drone control stations need electricity for screens, radios, data links, antennas, and signal boosters. Many forward positions cannot depend on the power grid, so they use generators. Mikhailo Fedorov said fuel shortages were creating problems for generators used by Russian drone teams. That statement came from the Ukrainian side and has not been independently confirmed across Crimea. Even so, the military logic is clear. One fuel tanker may support several control sites, communications posts, or electronic warfare teams. If that tanker is delayed or destroyed, the effect can spread farther than the loss of one vehicle. This is where a supply problem begins to weaken battlefield awareness. A generator with less fuel must run for fewer hours, and a control crew may be forced to shut down some equipment. Operators could move closer to a power source, but that may reduce coverage or expose the site to detection. Power gaps can interrupt reconnaissance missions, delay strike coordination, and break the flow of information between drones and commanders. If Russian forces see less of the surrounding area, convoys and engineering crews may receive warning too late when Ukrainian drones approach. The result is not total blindness, but shorter coverage and slower reaction. That uncertainty affects the kind of vehicles Russia is willing to send forward. Large military trucks, armored carriers, and engineering machines are easy to recognize from the air. They produce strong heat, make more noise, and need roads wide enough to carry their weight. Heavy equipment depends on bridges with high load limits, which makes its route easier to predict when only a few crossings remain open. A large convoy cannot quickly leave a highway or disappear between trees. Once discovered, it may be followed for many kilometers before a strike team receives the coordinates. This risk has pushed some Russian units to reduce their use of larger vehicles, and that has opened the way for smaller machines. Motorcycles, all-terrain vehicles, and light buggies can use dirt tracks, narrow paths, and gaps between tree lines. They are cheaper, faster to spread out, and less dependent on major bridges. A group can divide into several directions, which makes it harder for one drone to follow every rider. These vehicles need less fuel for each trip, so they can keep moving when supply is limited. However, their advantages come with serious limits. Riders have almost no protection from artillery fragments, rifle fire, mines, or FPV drones. A motorcycle can carry a soldier and a small load, but it cannot replace a truck carrying ammunition, water, spare parts, or wounded personnel. That trade becomes more costly as the front demands more support. Russia's shift toward lighter transport shows adaptation, but it also shows pressure. Smaller vehicles may keep some supplies moving, yet they reduce protection, cargo capacity, and the speed at which a large force can gather. More trips are needed to move the same amount of material, and more drivers are exposed along the route. This means Russia can still operate, but it must accept higher risk for lower output. The campaign has not cut the supply network, although every adjustment now appears to make that network less efficient and more fragile. Russia's slower advance in 2026 may be linked in part to Ukraine's campaign against medium-range logistics, but the connection must be explained with care. An offensive does not move only because soldiers receive an order. It needs infantry, artillery shells, fuel, drones, engineering equipment, communications, and medical evacuation working at the same time. If one part slows, the others begin to wait. Russia can still attack under pressure, but it becomes harder to keep the same pace across several directions. That is where logistics begin to shape the map. If deliveries arrive late, commanders may postpone assaults, reduce artillery fire, or commit fewer reserve units. Those choices rarely produce one dramatic collapse, but they can steadily narrow Russia's options across the front. Over time, a slower support system can turn tactical pressure into a wider operational weakness for forces. Figures cited from the Institute for the Study of War suggest that Russian forces gained about 2.9 square kilometers per day during the first 4 months of 2026, compared with roughly 9.76 square kilometers per day in the same period of 2025. Deep State also reported that Russia captured about 84 square kilometers in June. These numbers point to a clear loss of momentum, but they do not prove that bridge strikes alone caused it. Territorial movement is the result of many pressures working together, and the supply campaign is only one of the most important. The wider battlefield must therefore be considered. Ukraine has strengthened defensive lines in several sectors, while the number of reconnaissance and strike drones has continued to grow. Russian forces have also lost vehicles, artillery systems, and trained crews, and those losses reduce the speed of later attacks. Terrain matters as well. Rivers, tree lines, urban areas, weather and minefields can slow movement even when supplies are available. Manpower replacement also changes from one sector to another. For that reason, weaker logistics should be treated as a major factor, not a complete explanation. Its real value appears in how it increases every other problem Russia already faces. Ukraine does not need to place soldiers along every road to make the network less reliable. It only needs Russian drivers to doubt which route is safe, when a crossing can be used, and how long a repaired section will remain open. That uncertainty forces commanders to use more vehicles to move the same amount of cargo, protect more locations with air defense, and send more equipment into repair work. Even when a road reopens, drones may continue watching it. This raises the cost of every delivery and reduces the freedom to concentrate supplies quickly. Still, the campaign has clear limits. Russia continues to use the Kerch Bridge, rail lines, sea transport, stored reserves, and temporary crossings. Moscow can also move more air defense systems, expand electronic warfare, use interceptor drones, and spread repair teams across several sites. These steps may reduce the effect of Ukrainian attacks, especially if strike pressure weakens. Ukraine must therefore maintain reconnaissance, target identification, and repeated attacks over time. Success should not be measured only by the number of bridges hit in 1 week. The better measure is how long Russia fails to restore its earlier transport capacity. That contest now reaches beyond any single crossing. Ukraine is using medium-range drones to influence the battlefield without launching a large armored offensive. Instead of attacking every Russian formation directly, Kyiv is striking the system that keeps those formations supplied, connected, and ready to move. Russia is answering with repairs, detours, smaller vehicles, stronger defenses, and wider dispersion. The result is a contest between destruction and recovery. Bridges are only the most visible part of that struggle, because the final outcome will depend on how much fuel, ammunition, equipment, and manpower actually reach the front. Ukraine's campaign against bridges and supply routes in the south has not completely cut Russian logistics, but it has made every movement more difficult to plan and protect. The main effect is not one destroyed crossing or one delayed convoy. It is the growing uncertainty across the entire supply system. Russian commanders must now consider whether a road is being watched, whether a repaired bridge will remain open, and whether fuel or ammunition will arrive before a unit needs it. That pressure can slow decisions long before troops meet Ukrainian forces at the front. Russia still has options. It can repair damaged infrastructure, build temporary crossings, use rail and sea transport, or divide cargo between smaller vehicles. But each answer has a cost. Repairs need time and protection. Light transport carries less material. Sea routes require ports, ships, and air defense. The system can continue to work, but it becomes less efficient and more exposed. That is why this campaign matters. Ukraine does not have to stop every shipment to influence the battlefield. It only needs to reduce the amount of support arriving at the right place and the right time. When that happens, artillery fires less, troops wait longer, and attacks become harder to sustain. Modern war is often decided far behind the trenches, where roads, bridges, fuel, and repair crews determine what an army can actually do. Subscribe to Military Force for clear analysis of the weapons, operations, and political decisions shaping today's conflicts.